I woke up to the sound of pure audacity, you know? Not a bird, not a siren, just sharp, echoing laughter, the kind that feels intrinsically wrong when it's bouncing off the walls of your own home. For a split second, I thought I was still dreaming, still back in the corporate grind, but then came the undeniable sound, a big, sloppy splash followed by another, and then the thumping beat of bad pop music vibrating right through the floorboards. I stumbled out of bed, heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, and ripped open the curtains, and just froze. It wasn't a nightmare, it was an invasion. 3 women, lounging in my private pool, complete with huge pink flamingo inflatables, sipping bright, fruity drinks, their Bluetooth speaker blasting some trashy song loud enough to wake the dead. One of them actually had the nerve to wave at me, right there in my own kitchen, like I was the intruder. This house, Sunstone Oasis, the one I'd worked 20 years, every late night, every canceled vacation, to afford, had literally been turned into a suburban water park overnight. And right in the center of the spectacle, sitting like a Roman empress on a swan inflatable, was Veronica Thorne. She had this enormous sun hat, movie star sunglasses, and a look of practiced confidence that only a lifetime of unchallenged entitlement could buy. That was the day I met Veronica, and the day she decided my piece and my pool belonged to her. I must have stood there for a full 10 seconds, just staring at the sheer absurdity of it all. My perfectly manicured backyard, the one space in the world I considered sacred, had been converted into some kind of exclusive resort. The morning sun hit the water, glittering off their cocktail glasses, and for a surreal moment, I honestly wondered if I'd made a mistake, if I'd walked into the wrong house, maybe broken into their dream. But then I glanced at the deed, framed right there on the kitchen counter. Nope. Every square inch of this property, including the deck, the patio, and every drop of water in that pool, was unequivocally mine. I stepped outside, trying desperately to sound calm, but failing miserably. All 3 heads swiveled toward me. Veronica, the ringleader, slowly raised her sunglasses, peering over the rim with that look, you know the one, like a queen inspecting an annoyingly persistent servant. "Oh, your pool," she said, with a laugh that felt like nails dragging across chalkboard. "Sweetheart, this is the community pool. You must be new here." I blinked. "No, it's not. I closed on this property 2 months ago. The pool sits on my land, inside my property line. You're trespassing." The other 2 women exchanged nervous glances, but Veronica just smirked. She had that tone, that patented HOA authority voice that can turn the most mild-mannered neighbor into a raging lunatic. "I wasn't notified about any sale," she said, leaning back as if reclining on a marble throne. "And I have a key, so unless you're squatting, I'd suggest you pack up." Her arrogance hit me like a blast of hot desert air mixed with chlorine. "Your key? That's impossible. I changed all the locks." She just shrugged, completely unfazed, and pointed vaguely towards the side gate. "Oh, the side gate. Yeah, that lock is governed by Section 9, Common Area Access. I have a master." I had no idea what Section 9 meant, and honestly, I didn't care. I'd read every page of the deed, every line of the Sunstone Ranch Estates guidelines before signing, and the pool, the deck, the patio, it was all explicitly private. Still, the way she spoke, her utter confidence, it made me second-guess myself, just for a moment. This was clearly a routine for her. "Ma'am," I said, forcing politeness, "you need to leave right now." Her smile widened. She stood up slowly, water streaming off her expensive floral cover-up, stopping just close enough for me to catch the strong scent of pricey, high SPF sunscreen. "Tell you what," she whispered, tilting her head, "why don't you call the HOA president, Greg Evans? Tell him Veronica said hi." Veronica. The name fit her perfectly. She gave me one last condescending look, flipped her wet hair over her shoulder, and said, "We'll see who really owns this pool." Then she gestured to her friends, and they all sauntered out, not through the front, but through the side gate, which, I noticed, she didn't struggle with at all. She really did have a key. That evening, I met Greg Evans, the HOA president, at the clubhouse office. He was polished, practiced, the kind of guy who says neighborly too often. I told him the whole story, showed him the time-stamped photos of Veronica and her friends lounging in my pool. He looked at the photo, looked at me, and laughed nervously. Ah, Veronica. Yeah, she's spirited. Look, I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding. We all share amenities here. This isn't an amenity, Greg. It's inside my property line. It's private property. He sighed, rubbing his temples, pretending to read his laptop. Right. But she's been a resident here for almost 15 years, Alex. We can't just assume malicious intent. Maybe you could extend a little goodwill. Goodwill, I repeated, absolutely incredulous. She broke into my pool. Let's not use words like broke in. He leaned forward, lowering his voice like we were co-conspirators. She's a respected member of the budget committee. Making enemies this early on won't do you any favors. I'm just saying, pick your battles. That phrase, pick your battles, stuck with me the whole drive home. It always sounds wise until you realize it's always advice that benefits the aggressor. When I got back, I tested the gate. Click. It opened again. The latch hadn't been broken or forced. It had been filed down. Someone had deliberately altered the metal so the new lock wouldn't seat properly. That's when it sank in. Veronica wasn't bluffing. She wasn't asking for permission. She was claiming territory. I installed a heavy-duty padlock, ordered 4 high-resolution outdoor cameras, and spent the entire weekend running wires. For a few days, peace returned. Then, Tuesday at noon, while I was sitting in my sterile corporate office miles away, my phone buzzed. Motion alert, backyard pool cam. I opened the live feed, and there she was. Veronica, alone, reclining perfectly on my private lounge chair, sun hat tilted just so, holding a cocktail glass like she was posing for Architectural Digest. She didn't even swim. She just sat there for 2 hours, scrolling through her phone, occasionally looking straight into the camera and waving. By Friday, she brought her friends back. They swam. They ate takeout. They left before I got home. It wasn't just trespassing anymore, it was a performance. She knew I was watching. That weekend, I marched back to the HOA office, determined to show them the video evidence. Greg wasn't there, but his nervous assistant told me, "Oh, Veronica is using the pool again? She mentioned community access. Didn't you two settle that?" Settle that. My hand was shaking as I pulled out my phone and played the latest footage. Veronica splashing, laughing, raising her drink to the camera as if toasting me. The assistant's forced smile evaporated. Oh, wow. Okay, I'll definitely make a note for the next board meeting. Don't bother, I said, my voice cold and flat. I'll handle it myself. That night, sitting at my kitchen table, surrounded by my deed, the plat map, the guidelines, all the proof that said I was right, I realized proof didn't matter to people like Veronica. They didn't believe in rules, only reactions. I stared out at the still, moonlight-reflected water and whispered, "You picked the wrong pool, Veronica." Because in that moment, something inside me clicked. It wasn't anger. It was pure, surgical resolve. I wasn't going to argue, beg, or shout anymore. I was going to plan, and the best kind of plan doesn't shout. It waits. The next morning, I opened my phone, scrolled through my contacts, and stopped at a name I hadn't seen in years. Dr. Mason Bellwether, Chemistry Department. My old grad school roommate. The only man I knew who could turn a bad idea into a brilliant thought experiment. "Professor Bellwether," I said when he answered, trying to sound casual. "Remember that stubborn friend from the dorms?" There was a long, amused pause. "Alex Sterling. How could I forget? What exactly have you gotten yourself into this time?" I told him the story, fast, clipped, all the way from the first invasion, the sun hat, the lock tampering, the HOA president's spineless smile, right up to the constant surveillance footage. When I mentioned the expensive, high SPF, titanium dioxide sunscreen she slathered on like it was war paint, Mason chimed in. The physical blockers. That's her signature scent, right?" "That's right, Mason. And listen, I need a visual aid. I need to make a spectacle. Something legal, temporary, non-toxic, and absolutely undeniable." He said, sounding both cautious and completely intrigued. "If your goal is humiliation and documentary proof, not harm, Alex, then yes, there are ways to create a visible, temporary reaction. Think theatrical dye more than chemistry experiment. You want to expose her, not injure her. Exactly. I repeated, relief flooding me. A color change. Loud. Undeniable. Something that reacts specifically with her high SPF armor. A theatrical unmasking. He was already thinking in constraints. I can formulate a water-safe tint that activates only in the presence of those specific sunscreen ingredients, under strong sunlight. It's more of a color trigger, like those pH strips we used in college. Safe, temporary, dramatic. But you have to promise me, Alex, safety first. No permanent harm, no surprises beyond color, and everything must be documented. I promised. I promised things I hadn't even thought of. No permanent harm, no medical risk, and no escalation beyond humiliation and exposure. Mason arrived 3 days later, carrying a briefcase that looked like it belonged to a very precise, very quiet assassin. He brought safety data sheets, samples, and a patient, mildly exasperated expression that said, "This is why we became scientists, not vigilantes." We set up shop in my garage. He talked me through the options. What you want is selectivity. Luxury sunscreens use high concentrations of physical blockers. We can use a harmless, commercially approved dye that temporarily binds to those stabilizers under UV exposure. It's the same type of colorant used in pool testing kits and cosmetic demos. He placed a few drops into a clear beaker of my pool water and added a dab of the specific sunscreen Veronica always used, the brand I'd painstakingly identified from zooming in on the camera footage. At first, nothing. Then, within minutes, the water shifted from perfect blue to a startling, vivid jewel-tone green. It was mesmerizing, like someone had flipped a switch on reality. We ran every control. Mason insisted on patch tests, on silicone, on white cloth, even on my own skin. The tint showed up only where the sunscreen was present. On bare skin or plain water, nothing. If you go forward, he warned, do not, under any circumstances, lie to the police about what this is. Be transparent. A harmless colorant activated by cosmetics. Your paperwork is your best defense. I tucked the small, sealed vial into a padded envelope and slid it into the pool toy cooler, the last place Veronica would ever look. Then I began the meticulous task of preparation. I called my trusted neighbor, Gary, a retired teacher. I told him the plan, a harmless public reveal to prove trespassing, and asked him to be a witness. He hesitated for a moment. Then his face broke into a grin. If it's safe and legal, Alex, do it. Somebody needed to tell this neighborhood what she's done. He promised to stand watch and record his own feed. The stage was set. The rage had cooled into cold, surgical planning. All we needed now was an audience, and for Veronica to swim. Saturday dawned perfect. Clear sky, warm, exactly the kind of weather that invites confidence and demand a pool day. Gary texted me 3 thumbs-up emojis at 9:18 a.m. All systems go. I loaded the vial into a handheld dispenser. Nothing dramatic, just a measure container, and walked out to the pool like a man going to Sunday service. Mason had emphasized restraint. Safety and legal defensibility were practical defenses. I added the precisely measured amount, recorded the exact timestamp on my phone, and gently swirled the water to disperse it. For 5 agonizing minutes, nothing happened. The pool was the same crystal blue I'd spent the morning loving. Around 11:40 a.m., I heard a car door, muffled but distinct. Gary texted, "Movement. Gate." I opened the camera feed. The gate swung inward, and there she was, framed against the desert sun like a cartoon villain taking her cue. Hat on, sunglasses in place, bag swinging. She paused on the threshold, then smiled that particular smile, the one that had caused so many small domestic wars in this community. She sauntered forward. She wasn't alone. 2 friends followed, laughing, one carrying a giant flamingo float. Veronica paused, as she always did, to slather on sunscreen. The ritual was almost theatrical, a slow, methodical rubbing into her arms and chest, that glossy coat of protection that smelled faintly of coconut and pure entitlement. For a few minutes, there was only chit-chat. I felt the electricity of the moment, the rare kind that precedes either disaster or triumph. Then, slowly, subtly, A green bloom appeared along Veronica's shoulder. It was tiny at first, like a smudge, but vivid, the color of crushed emeralds. She glanced down, puzzled. Her friends laughed until they saw the green spreading across the water surface, then across Veronica's skin, then across the pink flamingo float. They shrieked. Veronica leaped out of the pool, sputtering and swatting at her dripping arms like a woman under attack by color. She was screaming, half outrage, half sheer bewilderment. And already, true to form, she found her phone and held it up, broadcasting live. "Oh my God, somebody help me. Chemical attack. Look what this man did." The irony was crushing. She was simultaneously accusing me of poisoning her and admitting, in front of potentially thousands of scrolling viewers, that she was in my backyard without permission. Neighbors appeared along the fence lines like birds drawn to a flash of color. Gary opened his garage door and filmed from a safe distance. The chaos filled the suburban air. I sat very still in my kitchen, recording every feed. I made a clinical note on my laptop. 11:47 a.m. 82 degrees Fahrenheit. Clear sky. Vial batch 245A applied at 10:12 a.m. Documented. Even the most entitled people have a moment where the mask slips. Veronica's face, flecked with green, staring at her own hands as if betrayed by her own skin, was not a cartoon in that second. She was a person whose calculated choices had just exploded into immediate public consequences. The police arrived 20 minutes later. They walked up with measured professional steps. By the time they reached us, Veronica was in full performance mode, tearful, indignant, pointing, accusing. Officer Ruiz, who quickly became my favorite person, didn't bother with the show. He asked calmly to see the license and registration, and then, more importantly, to watch the security footage. We handed over everything. The officers watched in silence as Veronica's narrative unraveled on loop. Gate open at 11:40. Veronica enters at 11:42. Sunscreen application at 11:44. Color manifestation at 11:47. It was all there. Her live stream, which was intended to gain sympathy, also showed her taking a selfie in the pool, saying to the camera, "Look, we're at Alex's new place. Exclusive access, huh?" That unguarded moment sealed her fate. The detective called me 2 days later. "We don't have evidence of chemical assault, sir," he said, his voice measured. "We do have evidence of trespassing. We have a clear chain of footage that shows Miss Thorne entering private property on multiple occasions. You documented every step. Your complaint is valid. Her complaint is closed." But the real consequence was only beginning. The scandal forced the HOA to call an emergency meeting, and when Greg Evans, the spineless president, was forced to open the books to calm public outrage, they stumbled onto something else entirely: missing funds. Thousands of dollars earmarked for community improvement projects that never happened. Veronica, the budget committee member, had been quietly padding invoices and redirecting funds for years. The green fiasco had broken her spell. Within a week, the audit results leaked. Greg resigned, claiming health reasons. Veronica's lawyer tried to hush the scandal, but the bank statements spoke for themselves. The HOA board dissolved pending a county investigation. When the police returned to her house, it wasn't for a pool dye complaint. It was for embezzlement. A few weeks later, the final restitution orders came down: $8,500 in damages to me for property interference and legal costs, 12 months probation for Veronica, and a restraining order keeping her 500 feet away from my property. The state also ordered her to pay full restitution to the HOA for the misused funds. Mason called later that night. "She's still green?" he asked, laughing. "Only in envy," I said. "You told me chemistry always delivers poetic results." The noise died down. The HOA sign came down. The neighborhood moved on, locking their gates out of principle now, not just fear. Veronica's house went on the market soon after, the "for sale" sign standing there like a tombstone marking the end of a very loud chapter. I didn't dance in the street. I didn't throw a party. I sat by the pool at dusk that week with a glass of wine and watched the water reflect the sunset. Blue, steady, unperforming. Justice, I realized, wasn't cinematic fireworks. It arrived in paper envelopes, through procedure, and sometimes through a very precise, very safe bottle of green dye. If this story taught me anything, it's that peace isn't given, it's protected. When someone crosses a line, they're testing whether you'll redraw it or let it blur. Veronica thought she could rewrite ownership through sheer arrogance, but facts, patience, and proof will outlast drama every single time. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't shouting, fighting, or stooping to their level. It's letting the truth do the talking.